Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Harmeet Dhillon, Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division, United States Department of Justice, and we're here to talk about a lawsuit that we filed today, an important lawsuit regarding religious freedom under the FACE Act. The Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act, FACE Act, makes it unlawful to use force, threats of force, or physical obstruction to intentionally injure, intimidate, or interfere with anyone exercising their religious beliefs at a house of worship. This law protects all faith communities equally: churches, synagogues, mosques, temples, and others. In recent years, there have been numerous attacks on synagogues throughout the United States. Yet there has been a lack of use of the FACE Act to stop these heinous attacks. The past administration only applied the FACE Act civil enforcement penalties to silence pro-life protesters while ignoring the same 1994 law was intended to protect pro-life crisis pregnancy centers and, importantly, houses of worship. The practice of turning a blind eye to these attacks on houses of worship throughout the United States stops now. Today, we announced the filing of a civil complaint against individuals and organizations who organized and carried out a violent protest that interfered with a religious event and obstructed worshipers at Congregation or Torah Synagogue in West Orange, New Jersey last year. These violent protesters meant their actions for evil, but we will use this case to bring forth good: the protection of all Americans' religious liberty. Let me summarize what happened in this incident last November. About 50 protesters, including the defendants, organized a masked protest and assembled illegally, without a permit, gathering near a Jewish worshiper's home before moving towards Congregation or Torah Synagogue in West Orange, New Jersey. Some of the protesters carried and blew vuvuzelas, horns capable of causing hearing damage, while shouting at Jewish residents as they passed their neighborhoods. The group marched onto synagogue property, blowing the vuvuzelas and shouting to drown out a memorial service and a Torah sermon. Defendants Altaf Sharif and Jane Doe blew vuvuzelas within inches of a Jewish worshiper's ears. Sharif then charged at the Jewish worshiper. When another worshiper intervened with pepper spray, defendant Eric Kamens pointed at the worshiper and shouted, "The Jew is here," prompting Sharif to place the worshiper in a chokehold lasting over 20 seconds. Even after the police ordered the mob off synagogue grounds, they continued shouting threats, including, "You can't hide," and "You're next." These actions constitute interference with protected religious worship in the United States and obstruction of access to the synagogue, which is illegal under the FACE Act. Our complaint seeks to enjoin the defendants from interfering with worship at synagogues or obstructing worshipers from synagogues throughout New Jersey, the fullest reach of the United States District Court in which we're filing this complaint. Now, let me summarize by saying why this matters. Violence and intimidation directed at synagogues and other houses of worship are not only attacks on individuals, they are attacks on an entire faith community, and they intimidate and deter people from exercising their protected First Amendment rights. Houses of worship in America must remain sanctuaries of peace, not places of fear. The Civil Rights Division has a duty to protect every community's right to gather and worship without harassment, threats, or violence. This administration stands against anti-Semitism, against political violence, and for the lawful free exercise of religion by our citizens. We have some exhibits here that come from the complaint, and the complaint can be made available as well, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Yes?
Thanks for doing this and answering questions. Can you explain how you decided and why this qualified for a civil complaint as opposed to filing criminal charges under the FACE Act?
Yes. Well, thanks for the question. We're filing the civil complaint now. We have the facts and the basis to do that, and I'm not ruling out criminal charges in this case. So that's definitely an option, not only under the FACE Act, but potentially other laws. Yes?
Do you have a sense of how much more frequent this type of activity is? Has it grown in magnitude and in volume?
I only can tell you anecdotally, that is my perception. I've been a lawyer representing people of faith for decades now, and it seems to me that we're seeing almost weekly, monthly escalations of violence. Of course, we all saw the terrible attack on the Mormon community over the weekend, and during the course of this administration, last 6 months, we've seen several such attacks without a commensurate response by the federal government. And so that is why we're using the FACE Act, I believe for the first time in history today, to prosecute an attack civilly on a house of worship. Yes.
So you said there were about 50 protesters, some of whom are named in the complaint. Can you explain which ones are named and why you chose to do so?
Yeah, I think the complaint speaks for itself. It's actually very detailed. You're going to see a number of screenshots that show from the video that was taken of this entire attack, who exactly was physical as opposed to simply being a protester. And the use of the vuvuzela within inches of someone's ears is a physical attack. And so you'll see a lot of detail about the people who are named. And again, we're not foreclosing other people being named. There may be a broader activity here that we will get into in the discovery process on this side. Yes.
Can you explain why this was brought under the FACE Act as opposed to a hate crime charge or some other law protecting religious freedom?
Well, I think the fact that the FACE Act has yet to be used for houses of worship, which was one of the intended purposes when the law was passed in 1994, sorry, I think is relevant. I think that Congress intended to protect, through this particular law, protests that crosses over into obstruction and disruption. And we believe in this administration in applying our federal civil rights laws as they're intended to be applied. And so I think it's important to use it that way. It's something that I was interested in and wondering why we aren't seeing civil and criminal cases being brought, and this is one opportunity to do that. So we're excited to see this case unfold and hope that other instances may also come under our scrutiny on this law. Yes.
And early in the administration, the Department of Justice said that it would be curtailing use of the FACE Act to whenever involved pro-life protesters who were, potentially blocking access to clinics. I just wonder, what is your message to women around this country who feel that, not prosecuting or using that statute might lead to more acts of intimidation that might prevent them from getting the access to health care that they need?
So I'm not going to necessarily accept your framing here, but I will say that it is our view that the prior administration used the FACE Act almost exclusively to punish peaceful protest, not violent protest like we're discussing here in this case, just peaceful protest. And what we're saying today is we're going to use the FACE Act in all of its intended applications, and that includes all types of healthcare facilities, to be very clear. I will certainly take any evidence I have of someone acting in a violent and oppressive manner against any healthcare facility, and that includes crisis pregnancy centers. It can include any type of health facility, and now, for the first time, houses of worship. Yes.
I have two questions, if that's okay. First, can you tell us how many other FACE Act investigations you have open right now, whether they're civil or criminal?
I cannot tell you how many, but I can tell you that there are others.
And then I just wanted to ask, since you mentioned the attack in Michigan this weekend, the White House said this morning that the suspect appeared to hate people of the Mormon faith. Have you been briefed at all on the investigation? Is there anything you can tell us about what you guys are learning about the potential motive there?
I cannot talk about what's going on in an ongoing investigation, but I can tell you that in the United States, every time there's an attack on a house of worship or worshipers, we immediately activate our prosecutors on the criminal section and are in touch with the FBI regarding that matter. So that happened yesterday, and unfortunately, it's become all too common that we have to do that, but the Civil Rights Division is charged as the nation's top prosecutors of hate crimes, and we take those very seriously. Now, in this particular incident, of course, prosecution may not be the outcome of, obviously, but we always look at how many people are involved in these things, and so there is an ongoing investigation. Yes?
There's been discussion and efforts to repeal the FACE Act. Can you address that in light of how you're using it in this case?
Yes, the Justice Department doesn't get involved in those types of legislative decisions. It's certainly something that I know people have discussed and been interested in But I think one of the issues here has been the weaponization of the FACE Act and only one particular use, whereas its intention was much broader, and Republicans did vote for the FACE Act in particular because of this aspect of it, which has never been used. And so I leave that to Congress. As long as laws are on the books, all of the civil rights laws that I swore an oath to uphold, we will be enforcing them in the United States. Yes.
So investigations and prosecutions like this and all of the ones that you're doing are like manpower and resource intensive. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how the ranks at civil rights have shrunk and whether you've been able to hire anybody yet and what types of folks you're looking to hire.
We have been hiring. There's a career hiring process, and I, as a political appointee, don't have anything to do with that. We post our jobs, and career attorneys interview and screen career hires. And so we actually have hired some people, and we're looking to hire more. And this type of case, the cases you've seen in the news, but frankly, all the cases, but we have, despite having some resource constraints like throughout the government, we've actually had, I would say, among the most aggressive and productive civil rights divisions in history in the 6 months that I've been in charge. We brought housing discrimination cases. We brought numerous hate crimes charges. We brought redlining cases. We brought cases involving our military being discriminated against. We brought a case against Uber for discriminating against blind riders. And so some of these cases are just traditional civil rights enforcement cases. We're thrilled to be this aggressive and active, and it's only going to ramp up from here. Any other questions? Yes.
Just to follow up on the January memo, so that limited abortion-related FACE Act cases to only extraordinary circumstances of violence and injury and things like that. Does that memo apply to cases like this at a house of worship? And were you aware of that memo in terms of making sure that this case fit in with those criteria?
Yeah, this is a different type of case than that type of case. But if the facts fit the enforcement criteria in a attack on a house of, not a house of worship, but on an abortion clinic, we would certainly look at that case. And the time that I've been in this office so far, those facts haven't presented themselves. So each case is taken on a case-by-case basis. We take the time to build the facts and investigate. And so I can't categorize or tell you right now what the outcome would be in an investigation like that, but the FACE Act is still the law, so we're committed to enforcing it in every way. Yes?
The people here in this case, the protesters and the possible defendants, is this the only incident that you're looking at them, or might there have been other similar cases?
If you take a look at the complaint, you'll see these are organized, semi-organized perhaps, groups, and I'll just leave it at that. I'm not going to say whether we're investigating them or not on other cases, but the fact that we're seeking an injunction that is quite broad, I think, gives you a hint as to what we're thinking. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you all for being here today, and we are happy to, if people have follow-up questions, they can certainly contact our press office, Natalie, there, and we'll make sure to try to get you answers. Thank you very much.